Start us off, Carter.
And welcome back to the Fazbear Files, your favorite podcast, true crime podcast, investigating the mysterious happenings at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza establishment. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic episode, a groundbreaking episode. We have finally managed to sneak into a long-defunct Five Nights at Freddy's location. We have Mike Schmidt on the scene. I'm going to cue him in now. Hello? Hello? Yes, I'm here. It looks barely touched since they closed this establishment 2 years ago on the report that multiple children went missing here. At least one of the animatronic characters is still on the stage. I'm looking around now. I'm trying to find. What's that? Ah! Mike? Mike? Well. Anyway, but it's actually Carter and Kevin Explain Football. Carter here.
And I think we should make that a legitimate series. I think. All right, hold on. Before we
Okay, are you familiar with the actual plots of the games at all?
I am actually, yes.
Yes, the third one vaguely is that. The idea is they buy out one of the locations and turn it into a kitschy amusement park.
No, but I'm kind of sold on the concept, and I might have to take a second after I pitch this to pitch it in the group chat. But we do true crime podcast about things like Five Nights at Freddy's or video games, like fake.
You know what's funny?
Or clearly allegedly fake events.
NYU had a radio station, and I always wanted to do a narrative show for that, but I just never really had the time.
Yeah, we do a semi-scripted, in-depth character-based series on some of us being true crime, cryptozoologists, whatever you want to call investigators. And everyone else just does characters and stuff in the background. I think that's a fun idea. I think that's just a fun concept. So, but this is us talking about football. And
yes, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin is back from his odyssey of moving and being sick. I have food poisoning. We're all gutting it out. This has been a season of overcoming. Yeah. I think it's safe to say for the NFL itself, we have overcome. Every team has had to overcome a numerous amount of injuries. We've overcome stuff, and now we're back to talk about weeks 4 and weeks 5, because I feel like thematically they tie together really well. It wasn't one of those weeks where one thing happens and then the exact opposite thing happens. I found that most of my highlights were consistent.
I mean, there's that. I think it felt more kind of on the opposite side of that a little bit. It you focus on the highlights, and it's yeah, this is me vindicating my point. I feel like it was hey, this is you're fucking around for this week, and then a follow-up week, here's your consequences. I feel like that's what happened.
Right. In a lot of ways, especially now that basically with the exception of the Kansas City Chiefs and inexplicably the Minnesota Vikings, we've seen how every team can win a game and how every team can lose a game. Most teams have had at least one fairly dominant win, one close win, and one tough loss. So we have a pretty good sense of what every team's weaknesses and strengths are, and it's easy to sort of break it down and talk about it now.
Yeah, it was week 4 was the vibe check. Week 5 was the vibe confirmed.
I agree. I like that take. Shall we dive in?
We shall.
All right. So I will kick us off with our highlights. He's back. Comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco, has returned to us, ladies and gentlemen. Very early in the Colts-Steelers game, Anthony Richardson took a pretty bad shot to the hip, inexplicably came back in and did a quarterback draw, and was replaced by Joe Flacco, since exiled from the Browns because he had too many positive vibes, and they're simply not allowed to have that anymore. kind of puts on yet another Joe Flacco classic. It is so funny that his play style really has not changed. This is basically the same thing he'd do back when he was on the Ravens, where it's like he's going to throw the ball 30 to 40 yards, and it's either going to be the greatest play you've ever seen, the most egregious interception you've ever seen, or it's going to be a pass interference penalty, and you win by default. And he looked incredibly competent. He marched downfield, got 2 scores. The game got a little tight at the end. I actually have been pretty impressed by Justin Fields' competence in these last 2 losses. He had his first 300-yard game. But yeah, so kind of a big takeaway for me is, one, what if we gave Joe Flacco Comeback Player of the Year again? And what's funny is previously my take was, what if they just give DeMar Hamlin Comeback Player of the Year this year because he's actually playing? And they're like, well, last year you didn't play, so now you're actually coming back. And I'm like, counterpoint, Joe Flacco again. I do think it creates an interesting question for the Colts, though. He is now 1-1 because last week they lost to the Jaguars in a pretty close game that the Jaguars were kind of begging to lose that game. It was a classic Jags game of terrible clock management, terrible situation, like situational football, refusing to run the ball when you have a lead, giving up 24 points despite having a very expensive defense.
34.
34. Well, they gave up 34 overall, but they gave up 24 in the fourth. Again, making Joe Flacco look like he somehow like possessed the spirit of Dan Marino. Still a live man. Yeah. Joe Flacco, again, we all love Joe Flacco. We love the meme of Joe Flacco. But if Joe Flacco throws for 359 yards and 3 touchdowns on your defense, something has gone horribly wrong with your scheme.
Yeah, I think I said it last. I believe this is how I described him last season. Joe Flacco is this like old wizard, kind of like Gandalf style, where he just kind of shows up and does good the majority of the time. And it's just kind of like, are you like he's one of the oldest players, still relatively active.
Right, like we were in middle school when this man got drafted.
Yeah. So it's like
he's 39.
Yeah, he's 39. He's very much up there in age. He's had like very big highs and very big lows in his career. So now I feel like he just travels from team to team, and then just kind of sits there as
quietly being better than their starting quarterback, but they're not allowed to admit that, so they have to ship him off before he makes too many friends.
Yeah, they invested too much in whoever they want their quarterback to be, so they don't want to put in Flacco, but he eventually takes over, and it's just like, let me show you guys how it's done. Like I'm assuming during the practices and stuff, he's offering the younger guy just like sage-like wisdom. He just sits there with a staff.
He has a pipe. It is amazing how much his general shtick and vibe works so much better now that he's like 40 and not like 25.
Yeah.
Just something about like him just throwing the ball as far as he can on every other play is way more charming when it's like, look at this silver-haired fuck. Like, it's Flacco the Gray. He's here. Yeah. He's going to delight us with fireworks.
No, he's like, because he shows up and he's like, he literally just like does the old man grunt, like me on vacation or just in life, where it's like, I have to get up and do like take care of business, where it's just like he puts both hands on the arms of the chair and just goes, ugh. And then he just probably says like something like, time to show these kids how it's done. And then just goes insane. And it's like,
it raises a fascinating question for the... Oh, go ahead.
It's like, like, for example, their Colts last touchdown, a 65-yard pass. That's kind of insane. And old man Flacco was just like, all right, let's do this real quick. And gets up.
Yeah, it is interesting because I do think it actually creates I think it helps the Colts that they didn't actually win last week. It makes it easier to go back to Anthony Richardson because you really should see if the young guy, he needs reps. Anthony Richardson, more than anything else, he needs to actually play the sport of football to get better. But at the same time, like, you ended up missing the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew. Like, I really think it would help. Colts coach? I always forget his name, even though
Shane
he's an Eagles
Steichen.
guy. Shane Steichen. I always want to say Steve Steichen for some reason,
Just go
even though that's like horrible to say.
yeah.
But I like it really would benefit him to make the playoffs one year just to get that clout of like, Brian Daboll got through some lean years in New York off the grounds of getting a playoff win. Like it really is amazing how an early playoff appearance can kind of like give you clout to get through like the dry patches. And a part of me has to wonder, like, do you just talk yourself into keeping Flacco in just to like see what you have on the team? Like see like, okay, what do we actually need on our offense? What are we missing here?
Yeah. I also feel
Or do you again just go for the high ceiling of Richardson?
Yeah, I also feel like the Colts have a very like almost a better team than last year. It's just they've had a harder group to go against. Cuz
Right.
they had the Texans who are the Texans. The CJ Strouds are on something fierce, which they
Right.
lost.
They got kind of pantsed by the Packers, who just kind of like
Packers,
rope-a-dope to them.
Yeah. Packers just, once again, these are all one-score games. They have not lost
Right.
by more.
They've been competitive in literally all of their games, which is more than a lot of teams can say this year.
Yeah, and then, like, they beat the Bears. They beat the Steelers, who were doing they were on fire for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, they just they didn't win against the Jaguars. I wouldn't say they lost. I would say they didn't win.
Right.
And those were all people fighting for their job. So I think it's going to be
Yes, that was actually you don't get to come home if you lose this game.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see, like, they play the Titans this upcoming games. All right. How's that? Like, Titans are kind of like a subpar-ish team. And then the Dolphins. And it's like, that's two back-to-back kind of relatively trash teams, for lack of a better description.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to put Richardson back in, and assuming he's healthy, you kind of have to do it now because it's like, here are two layup games. Can you please, like, you don't have to throw for 300 yards. Just have a positive completion percentage. Just get to like the 55, 60%. Move us downfield. Get us enough points to win. Like, just look more competent or more developed than you have the last few weeks. Moving on, highlight number 2, Captain Jalen Daniels of Space Command continues his heroic conquest of the National Football System. Oh, you didn't listen last week. Yeah, so my bit is Jalen Daniels is an astronaut.
Oh, like Josh
Yes.
was?
Yes.
The Pastronaut?
But he's the Pastronaut, but for real. I believe I called it the Jalen Daniels Space Program because I thought it was funny that he works for because he plays in Washington and also he throws these like delectable moon balls. Just that beautiful pass that if you're playing Madden, you have to zoom all the way out to see the ball like going over the stands.
Mm-hmm.
But like, the last 2 weeks they played the Cardinals and once again it was incredibly efficient. They didn't score once and that was because he threw an interception. A really good play by the defender, honestly. This was supposed to kind of be the come down to earth game of like, all right, this Cleveland defense, like this is the first real defense they've played all year. They've kind of gotten a cupcake schedule to start. So let's see how they do against the Browns. And it was a little slow going at first. They had some struggles. He threw another interception that was kind of a misread. Like it was the first time I've seen him where he looked like a rookie, where it's like, he misread the coverage and didn't think a guy would be there. And then basically by halftime, the game was over. Another incredibly efficient day for him. 82 yards on the ground, 230 through the air. A couple absolute dimes. A 66-yarder to Terry McLaurin on the run. Someone pointed out what's been special about him this year so far is compared to last year, his really big struggle was, like in college, is whenever he would get pressured, he would stop looking downfield. He would just run.
Mm-hmm.
Like his two options were stand in a clean pocket, throw the most beautiful pass you've ever seen 60 yards downfield, or race for your life, Charlie Brown. This year, he's been way better at like staying behind the line of scrimmage, finding who he needs to, and just throwing these beautiful passes. They murked this really good defense. And granted, the Browns defense is not as vaunted as it was last year. Poor Myles Garrett has been going through it with injuries this year. And also, the last couple games, the Browns defense has had the energy of like, we'll give you a half of football, and if Deshaun Watson doesn't show up to play, we're not trying anymore. We're not like getting injured for this. But still, it's exactly what you want to see of like incredible confidence, incredible poise, and just efficiency. Again, I'm a little worried because, the hype is getting a little out of hand. We're talking MVPs now. And also, famously, Cliff Kingsbury offenses went out of steam once the leaves start turning. Like, he's not a pumpkin spice guy. The season throws him off. And basically, or as to put it another way, enough defensive coaches watch his offense and figure out all the tricks.
I was gonna say, I think that's the thing, where it's just like, he starts off very hot because it's the beginning of the season. There isn't much, for lack of a better term, data. And then the data starts to collect, and then it's like people are like, oh, let's say if Jalen Daniels drops back, let's say for example like 3 yards, and he's looking left, he's going to like, and there's like only 2 like defenders over there, he's gonna odds are throw it to the wide out one, like something like that, or it's like all right, 3rd and 2, odds are they're going to either run it or do like a pitch back to somebody and go like super far wide, like just like they learn very quickly, kind of like how the Eagles were last year, where it's just like they like were a very dominant team for the majority of the season, and then everyone caught up with their shenanigans, and it's just because they didn't keep things fresh.
Right. And you realize they don't really have plans for when things go wrong. The problem with the Eagles last year was it's like, oh, they're just blitzing us more. And it's like, well, we don't have a blitz package. We kind of just do the same thing we're doing and hope our guys outguy their guys. And I am worried that's going to be a reality because, again, there are talent deficiencies on this offense. Outside of Terry McLaurin, it is a pretty weak pass-catching unit. The offensive line is good, not great. But I do, I have a lot of faith in the running backs. I've always been partial to Brian Robinson. But, it will be interesting. I'm hopeful. I'm keeping my hope up because it would be a really cool story. Mm-hmm. And even though it comes at the expense of the Eagles, because let's be honest, the way it's looking, they've got a really clean path to the conference division title.
It's looking like that. I think it's just hilarious that it's like one of those situations where it's just like, if it was Dallas, I'd be super upset.
Right, it's hard not to be happy for Washington fans, right? Have they not earned this through struggle?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say they haven't earned it through struggle, but it's like, all right, Commanders, I'll allow. I would allow it more if it was the Washington football team still, if I'm being honest. I thought that was the silliest and best name ever.
I know Dan Snyder did it to be passive aggressive because he never wanted to change the team name, and it was basically like a kid throwing a temper tantrum. But it kind of did work in that like old school, like it's the same energy that gets you Green Bay Packers, just like this very sort of like old timey twirly mustache name.
Yes.
And like, yeah, again, someone made a comment of like, it's one of those things where it's like, you wish you knew you were in the good old days before the good old days happened.
Yes.
Somehow, Washington is in a time machine. It's like, hey, remember how fun that brief moment with Robert Griffin III was? It was very similar in terms of like beautiful deep ball, insane straight line speed, offense built around the idea of like, if he fakes a handoff and starts moving, it's just over. Well, they get to just be in a time machine and enjoy that again because it's basically the same thing. And, I just kind of like, again, it's good for football if this guy's good, and I hope he stays healthy and keeps it up through the whole year.
Yeah, it's good for football. It's fun football watching.
Mm-hmm. Another highlight from these last 2 weeks: the Ravens live up to their promise. So the Ravens, I'm willing to throw out that Raiders game. The more I see of the Ravens, like the last 2 weeks have really shown like what the ideal form at this point you really do want to see what the ideal form of a team's offense can be. Mm-hmm. Like when everything is working exactly how you envision it, like are you as good as you like what is the upside of your team?
Yes.
on Sunday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills, I would call it a chain snatching, a swirly forcing, a pantsing, a kick in the ding dong, a slap in the face, smooch your mama and toss your girlfriend into the recycling bin, eat all your prickly pears, steal all your Funko Pops, set fire to your diorama of Debbie Reynolds.
Carter, do you want to
Anyway,
talk
the
about
point
stuff?
is,
Do we need to
it
end
was
this
a
and
rough game.
we just have a chat?
I'm fine. I've learned to cope. I'm losing my mind. I've met my kids don't eat don't have your car break down at the grocery store and convince yourself the yogurt will be fine. Don't. Just don't. Derrick Henry broke off an 85-yard run to start the game and basically never looked back. Was 1 yard short of 200 yards. He's one of the fastest players to get to 10,000 yards and 100 touchdowns.
Yes.
Um,
I'm very glad he
the
kept that
rushing
up.
offense, like they are on pace for 3,000 yards combined. Yes. They are on, Lamar and Henry are on pace for over 3,000 yards combined. And Bills fans in particular were very annoying about Lamar Jackson, whether or not he quote unquote deserved the MVP or not. This first game was very much a Derrick Henry game. Jackson just was like quietly efficient, doing exactly what he needed to do. The second game was the Lamar Jackson game against the Bengals, probably the game of the year so far, a 41-38 absolute thriller.
Top
348 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had a truly beautiful play. Like, I always try to invoke at least one individual play every week for you guys to watch. Fumbles the snap from shotgun, manages to scoop it up, has a man on him, throws him like a rag doll, as commentator says, and right on the sideline whips a ball into the end zone that manages to be caught by Isaiah Likely. Absolutely beautiful. Like, truly a back-and-forth game. I do feel bad that the Bengals' offense actually looks exactly as good as you hope it was, but their defense is just god-awful this year.
Just to date ourselves, timestamp this. I just watched the Seahawks do a kick return for a touchdown.
Oh, they just returned one?
Just returned it.
Nice. Oh, thank God. I need that game to be competitive, so Ayuk stays in the game.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. But also, I don't know. I just like competitive. Poor Al Michaels deserves a competitive game.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I feel bad for the Bengals because Joe Burrow also was on a heater this game. Jamar Chase and... Yes. This point is about the Ravens, but I'll say about the Bengals, look, what else are you going to spend the money on other than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? You didn't spend it on the defense because the talent drain is really starting to show. So you might as well just pay those guys because this is proof concept of, you will be competitive as long as all three of them are healthy and together. But anyway, I will say there was a dramatic moment where it looked like Lamar might have cost them the game. Fumbled another snap, had it lost, and in some of the most inexplicable, play calling decision making I've ever seen, instead of, taking advantage of the fact that Jamar Chase was actually shooting laser beams out of his eyes. Yeah. He looked like Superman out there, just simply unable to be tackled. They decided to run the ball right up the gut 3 times, try a 50-yard field goal. Field goals don't win games because the holder fumbled it. And then Derrick Henry runs 50 yards on a single carry and basically ends the game.
Yeah, he sensed it to death.
Yes. But it's this is what we were hoping to see from the Ravens, where it's if they can just get... they don't need great play from the right side of their offensive line. Mm-hmm. They just need capable. And also seeing them also adapt, where they're going much more from under center, because that's always been Derrick Henry's thing. He's never been great at a shotgun. He needs that 4 to 5 yards of just acceleration to get moving. And the fact that they're willing... and that's what we're talking about. Are you willing to adapt? Are you willing to put packages into your... it's not like you're drawing up plays at halftime, but it's over weeks, can you add just 3 or 4 plays to your base package that lets you do stuff that your players vibe with?
Yeah. And it's also they had a very rough start to the season with
mm-hmm.
a very I think they should have won that game against the Chiefs. I think they got
that's as cool as we've ever seen.
Yeah. They should have won that game. And then the Raiders, they lost by 3, and they kind of blew it a little bit. but it's like they're
I'm willing to
theoretically,
throw it. That might be the throw-out game of the year where it's like, this, everyone was drunk.
yeah, but it's like
Go
they're
home.
showing off like what
Right.
they were last season and where they've improved.
But yeah, it is absolute. Like again, this like, and they needed to win these games because it's like they, the Steelers have a huge lead on them. They need to catch up to the Steelers, and the Bengals again. They've lost a couple heartbreakers now in absolutely chaotic fashion. So like, every win helps, and I'm suddenly convinced like. I know we always do this too early in the season. It causes mayhem, but I'm putting them as kind of the team to beat until proven otherwise. We are going to have a very big game coming up that I think will help further clarify that stance. Especially because, like, I don't think their schedule is that hard. The Browns look like cupcake games now.
Yeah.
They're playing the Broncos, which will be competitive. The Chargers will be competitive. The Giants will be, like, they're playing a lot of competitive games, but ones they are favored in, ones that they should win.
Agreed.
Our next point. Oh, yes. So let's do our don't sleep on games just for week 4. And then after a couple more
Yes.
notes, we'll do our don't sleep on games for week 5. Do you want to kick us off with yours?
Hold on. Did I mix it up? I did not mix it up. All right, I just wanted to make sure I didn't mix it up. So mine was the Minnesota Vikings versus Green Bay Packers.
Now that was a drunk game.
That was a drunk game. Vikings started off with a 28-0 lead, and then it's like Sam Darnold is starting, and it's like about like second quarter towards the end, Green Bay was like, oh, like we're kind of close, and then at halftime they're like, oh, we should probably like, I don't know, try to win. Yeah,
Right.
that seems like a great idea.
Right. It's like, shoot,
going.
this is a divisional game.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck!
Yeah, going into the half, it was 28-7. The final score was 29-31 Vikings.
Right. If you're not living for this level of madness, then what are we doing? Truly, Jordan Love came back. I really think they should have sit him for 1 or 2 more weeks just to be safe.
Yeah.
Like, would they have won with Malik Willis? I don't know. This would have been a very hard challenge for him. But you were at least looking. It wasn't like you were getting run off the field. You wouldn't have gotten run off the field, I feel like, with Malik Willis. And you don't want to, the next 10 years of your life are dependent on Jordan Love. But regardless, he came in and tried to do his best Brett Favre impersonation, derogatory and kind of complimentary, I guess.
Yeah.
The first, here is everything the Green Bay Packers did in the first half. Missed field goal, interception, missed field goal, interception, downs, punt, and then they finally got a touchdown because someone muffed the punt. And then they go on a heater at the end of the game. Well, actually, let me counter it by showing you what the Vikings did in the second half. Interception, punt, fumble, field goal, punt, downs, end of game.
Yeah.
I will say, like, as impressive as the Vikings looked, and arguably they have the best offensive and defensive coaching staffs of the entire league right now, again, this game just showed why a lot of people aren't willing to buy into the Darnold-sance or renaissance of Sam Darnold yet. Because there is always that goddamn moment where something in the back of his head goes, hey, man, what are you doing? You're Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
Oh, right. And he forces an insane interception, or he runs around with the ball too much and gets it fumbled, or takes a back-breaking sack. Fortunately for him, Jordan Love was on a similar heater and threw 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, a truly deranged stat line from him. The Packers would make it up next week with a very similar chaotic performance from Jordan Love. But, yeah, an absolutely delightful game for utter chaos and showing both the best and worst case scenarios for both of these teams.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess that means I pull up mine. Mine was the Bears versus the LA Rams. So kind of a weird one for me. I guess I'm clinging to the dream of the LA Rams as long as I possibly can.
You really are.
That they'll get their players back. They'll keep winning. They're literally tied for the worst record in the NFL, and yet I still believe. But this was a very impressive game in terms of like, it really was a much needed game from Caleb Williams
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, look, he's a rookie. We can all take a breath. There's growing pains. With the benefit of hindsight, this offense was. They probably should have invested more in the offensive line and maybe didn't need to necessarily get another wide receiver in the draft. And maybe I'm just a salty bitch because I wanted Roma Dunze. But this was a much more like you're seeing what you want to see from Caleb Williams, and this was the best example of that. Of like, okay, he's learning what he can and can't get away with, and running a much more efficient offense. And also, in general, the offense is just learning what it can and can't do. It's like, okay, we really can't block well, even against this ho hum Rams defense. So we are just going to screen the shit out of the ball. We are going to run the ball, and we are just not going to have turnovers. DeAndre Swift, who was kind of left to the, like, as I described it last week, DeAndre Swift, this was I see year for DeAndre Swift where you're like, why did these good teams with good offensive lines get rid of this guy who was producing? You see him with a bad offensive line and you're like, oh, I see. Negative vision. Does not know where to look.
I think that's a great description.
He, you know, like we all clowned on Jameis Winston for getting LASIK. I actually think DeAndre Swift might need LASIK. But yes, they were able to look way more efficient and way more competent this game. And again, it's like, you know, those glimmers of hope that you want to see with a young quarterback at this point. This was like, and arguably both weeks that we're talking about. It's the first time where I'm like, well, now you just look like a competent, like even keel offensive, you know, quarterback who got drafted first. Especially because, man, that pressure was starting to build up with how good the Commanders looked. As stupid as it sounds to be after a month of the season, be like, hey, did you draft the wrong guy, number 1 overall? Mm-hmm. Well, sans Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, but meanwhile, the poor Rams just, again, you look at them, you watch them play, you're like, given that you lost your two starting wide receivers, like multiple offensive linemen, and your defense is basically all rookies, it's not even that bad a result. But it's just like, you know, you can't feed your family or make the playoffs off of vibes. Mm-hmm. And like, well, they're overperforming.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific highlights you wanted to do for week 5 before we go to the lowlights?
Old man Kirk.
Yes, the most deranged Kirk, like the most insane Kirk Cousins stat line that we will ever see in our entire lives. Another team that is kind of living up to the promise of the offseason finally.
The Falcons went 42 for or not Falcons, Kirk Cousins specifically. 42 for 58. 509 yards. 4 TDs, 1 interception. I just like I know we're a decade into like offense being the core. Like it's been a decade since Tom Brady tore his ACL and like the entire league pivoted to offense, but like still seeing 500, the number 500 is insane.
Mentally I can't process how many times you have to throw the ball to achieve that.
Yeah. It's 42, that's the answer.
I do love someone made the quip of like, hey, Kyle Pitts finally had a good game, and it only took Kirk Cousins throwing the ball 58 times to get 88, not even 100 yards, just 88. Yeah, an absolute barn burner on Thursday night. They ended up winning in overtime 36-30. Every single yard was needed on that one.
Oh, absolutely. It was insane. And it was like, I think, how did I describe that last week? It was like old man Kirk energy, where it's just like, it's like, so like Joe Flacco has this wizard energy, like that kind of old man energy, and Kirk, like, I feel like the switch just flipped of like, I can just be a gunslinger today. And just started throwing absolute bombs.
Yes. Right. It's like, I didn't think he was capable of this. Because again, we talk about the limitations of Kirk Cousins. We talked about his calf, like struggling. And like, granted, the Buccaneers defense is nothing to write home about, but just gutting it out and like actually standing in the pocket that often just has to be the lightest breath of like the lightest sigh of relief from the entire coaching staff and the fandom of like,
Mhm.
okay, we can. If the goal was we just need a competent level quarterback to get us to the playoffs, well, congratulations. This is what a competent level quarterback
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. And it's just like
Yeah,
he's using, and it's like he's throwing it to everyone too. He's not like,
right,
I got like one favorite. That's it. And I think that's
right.
what puts him in a different like world than like someone like Aaron
Right.
Rodgers is.
Darnell Mooney and Ray McLeod are getting fed.
Yes. Let's see. Drake London had 12. Darnell Mooney had 9. Pitts had 7. Um, Cardale
McLeod had
Hodge
6.
had 2. Yeah. Bijan had 3. Like, Algier had 3. Like, all receptions. And it's just like, what a just absurd, just like, I'm going to just find the open man mentality.
Right? Like, people talked about Bryce Young being like a quote unquote point guard of the ball. Well, this is what it actually looks like of like, hey, we spent a lot of money on a lot of different offensive players, some of whom we didn't even draft. Like Darnell Mooney is like a like, is a was like living in the graveyard of Chicago for the last few years and they
Yeah.
just bring him in. It's like, can you get the ball to literally everyone?
Yeah.
And just in general, I'll say about this game, like, man, you know what? This is also coming off a crazy Saints Falcons game.
Yes.
Like, thank God the NFC South is at least they're competitive now. Like, at least they're putting up good games.
Yeah. I think they might be one of the more fun divisions to watch this season because it was such a pile of poop last season, and
Mhm.
they all like look like they woke up out of nowhere.
Right.
Like it's not gonna be the most competitive division. Like if you're against the Panthers, have fun.
Right.
Saints Derek Carr is like out for a little bit possibly. I don't know the exact timeline with Derek Carr, but it's like all right, this just lost like a secret driving force. So it's like I think it might be one of the more fun ones to watch. Like it's I think some of the divisions have completely flopped. Like they went to a fun one to watch. The AFC North has dropped down significantly on how fun it is to watch. Same with the AFC South.
Right. Yeah, the AFC South has done nothing but disappoint me this year. Whereas
this is
I could get excited
fun.
about
Yeah.
this.
Like kind of like the NFC West, where if the 49ers were first, I would be like, all right, this is kind of like, whatever. It's again last year, but they're not first. They're third, and I think that's hilarious.
Mm-hmm. All right. So now on to the lowlights. Bills fumble back to basics. All right, I'll make this quick. After starting 3-0, the Buffalo Bills have kind of crashed and burned, and not just in the sense that they lost the games, but it was how they lost the games.
Mm-hmm.
The absolute drubbing at the hands of the absolute drubbing at the hands of the Ravens. They ended up losing 35-10. On top of losing last week 23-20 against the Houston Texans. It is stunning how very similar the problem in both games was. Namely, their offense kind of borders on non-functioning at times. In a lot of ways, they've regressed all the way back to 2019, where it was physical freak Josh Allen and a scrappy defense basically having to make chaotic splash plays. For every like horrible pass Josh Allen threw, he'd throw a 50-yard bomb that just happened to end up in someone's hands, or he'd run the ball for like 30 yards, rumble, bumble, stumble, and the defense would create just enough turnovers that they could scrape along and win games like 20-23. The problem is with that, Josh Allen is getting the crap kicked out of him. He's not running because his hand hurts,
Yeah.
and your best, like two of your best other offensive players, James Cook now has turf toe and Khalil Shakir has an ankle problem. When you go and watch the all 22 of these games, it is sobering how unopen the wide receivers are. truly, it seems like these two teams crack the playbook of if you just play straight man and pressure, like keep a spy on Josh, like the offense just can't function. No one gets open, and Josh has to regress to that. Like, I have to try and force it in. People talk about that final drive against the Texans where they throw the ball 3 times and basically give the Texans a field goal. And I'm like, what else were they supposed to do? Like, James Cook is out. It's too obvious they're going to run. They can't do like developed route concepts because Josh Allen clearly just got concussed on the last drive, and like he can't. If you let him hold on to the ball, he will get hit, and that's when horrible things can happen. Your only hope for this offense is to just throw it as far as you can and hope you get lucky with either like a dumb luck catch or a penalty. In general, like a lot of Bills fans are like, well, this was kind of expected. We are kind of regressing this year. Like 3-2 really isn't that bad. And it's like, yes, but the rest of the NFL is opened up in a way where you can't really afford to screw up this year. Like out of the AFC, who are the teams you really believe in? Because like I don't believe in the Kansas City Chiefs, especially after they lost Rashee Rice. Like the Texans are fine. They're not as good as we hoped they'd be. Like the Ravens look good, but again, they're prone to giving up a game to the Raiders every now and then.
Yeah.
Like
I don't think
to see this.
There's not a clear standout.
Right.
Of like last year, it was like this is the Ravens' conference to lose, and they kind of did to the Chiefs, but it's the Chiefs and they're the new Patriots. You know how it is.
Yeah.
But it's like the Bills are in a very close division. Like despite the shit show that's happening to every other team, they're only 1 game ahead.
Yeah. Which is fundamentally a problem because, like, they're in even worse shape than you are.
Yeah.
And it's like, I will give the defense at least a modicum of credit that they have stayed relatively competitive, that Ravens game notwithstanding, despite having, 2 starting linebackers out, multiple starting cornerbacks out, and just kind of being a mess overall. But, like, again, it's just... And it was fitting it was the Ravens and the Texans. Because, again, Bills fans have been really annoying about Lamar Jackson not, quote-unquote, deserving his MVP. And also about how we, quote-unquote, didn't need Diggs. We didn't need Diggs. He didn't do anything last season. But then you realize, oh, right, having one guy who can consistently get open opens literally everything else up. Because if they can't man cover one receiver, it's hard for them to justify man covering any receiver. And that just makes everything easier for everyone else. And then, yeah, you get into a situation where you just have a fundamental lack of dudes who can make plays, and you can't keep asking your quarterback, who's supposed to be the next 5 years of your life, to keep getting hit in the head. I genuinely, I don't know. I was so much madder. If we did this episode even 3 days ago, I would be spitting fire. But it's the same stuff I've been saying for a while of, like, yeah, you stop being cute with personnel, stop being cute with play calling.
Yeah.
Like, the biggest takeaway one of the biggest takeaways for me is just, like, how kind of, for lack of a better word, useless a lot of these draft picks and signings are in terms of, like, if you can't do the basic things right, why are you trying to get cute? As someone on The Athletic said, it's like, oh, we're going to draft James Conner, this pass-catching running back who'll be a great check-down option. It'll, like, open up all this stuff. And it's like, or you could just draft a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Dalton Kincaid, he's basically like a slot receiver who's big. We can have him in 2 tight end sets and we can like do all this crazy stuff. Or you could just draft a wide receiver. Like, again, you can trying to get cute and trying to have all these like artisanal offensive weapons, especially when you are not an offensive driven team, is a problem. Like, again, Brian Daboll's like probably there's a very real chance he loses a job this year. But if he had Dalton Kincaid and if he had James Cook, those motherfuckers would be getting 20 touches a game. Like he would make a point to get them the ball and figure out artisanal ways to do it. But instead, we're on Joe Brady, who only got the job because Ken Dorsey got fired, who only got the job because Brian Daboll left because he wanted a head coaching job. We are on the diet version of this offense without the mastermind behind it, and it's just. Again, it's sobering. It's sobering to see the talent drain. It's sobering to see, like, man, you really do need to have an offensive coach. You really do need to have, like, a locked-in offensive scheme. You really do need to just pour money into wide receivers and hope you get lucky. And as much as I like Keon Coleman, it just, again, underlines, like, that pick made more sense when you had Stephon Diggs. Now you're kind of asking him to do too much. I don't know. My stance is, especially with the concussion stuff, I don't think Josh Allen should play this week and probably shouldn't play for 2 weeks. I think you need to spend the rest of the month trying to trade. You don't have to go get. You don't have to get Devontae Adams. That's whatever. That's a big ask. But you have to get a receiver, like one either deep threat or separation guy who can open up all of this. And if you can't get that, I think you have to have a conversation of like,
He needs
what makes more.
He needs one or two people to like throw to, and he has.
Yeah, to actually throw to.
Yes.
Like the idea that you are throwing 40-yard deep balls to Mac Hollins, a man who is only on this team because he blocks and can play special teams, is just kind of an unacceptable outcome for a quarterback this good. And I genuinely think you have to have the discussion about pulling the plug because, again, concussion, bad hand, like, yeah, I know that sounds extreme, but the alternative is you take a year off this man's career because he's just getting hit all the time. I went a little over on that, so we will pick up the pace a little bit. This is a really poor taste joke. I don't know if I should say this one.
I don't even know which one you're going for.
I just highlighted it.
I mean, it kind of leads into this last week's.
Jets in New York. What could go wrong? A lot. The Jets season has inexplicably become a tire fire. Well, not inexplicably. This was always in the range of outcomes. Let's be honest with ourselves.
I think
there was always a.
I think we are seeing what would have happened last year if Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt.
Isn't that funny to think that this exact same scenario was almost certainly going to happen? Because it wasn't like he was lighting the world on fire on that first drive. I believe the plays were big run by Breece Hall, run for his life, and get sacked and tear his Achilles tendon.
Yeah.
But yes, we are seeing what happens when you put all of your chips on a 40-year-old quarterback who's been too busy doing crack to learn how modern NFL defenses work. So it started with a absolutely hilarious 10-9 loss to the Denver Broncos, and there was a lot of talk that this was a revenge game. Because apparently Nathaniel Hackett deserves to be revenged, even though he was a bad coach who did a bad job in Denver. Russell Wilson was bad, let's be honest. But also Nathaniel Hackett also wasn't good.
Let's be real. The best thing to come out of Russell Wilson's time in Denver is Broncos country, let's ride.
Right? Well, have you heard his new slogan, even though he's not the starting quarterback?
Is it Steelers country?
Win the seventh. No, win the seventh. As in win the seventh ring for Pittsburgh. Oh. But also, I'm convinced it's also a quasi-religious thing. Win the seventh day. When everyone's resting, we're grinding. Which is arrogant, because it's like, well, if God's resting, why aren't you? But, we don't need to get into theological comparative study right now. Anyway, I just want to read this stat line from Bo Nix, because you can be guilty of, box score chasing. But I really do think this sums up the day perfectly. Bo Nix, 12 of 25, 60 yards, and a touchdown. 12 throws. Do you want to guess the average per throw that is?
6. I couldn't
2.
do the math. 2, damn it.
2.5 yards. You could literally, if you went for it on fourth down, you would barely make the first down line if you literally threw 4 passes for 2.4 yards. Just an anemic display from the offense. And then they turn around, go to London, and also lose a closer game, but still a very embarrassing game to the Minnesota Vikings, 23-17, where Aaron Rodgers throws 3 interceptions. Note that I'm criticizing the offense more than the defense, because despite all of this, Robert Saleh, the Jets head coach, got his ass fired.
Yeah.
In kind of shocking fashion, he was not prepared for this.
I have a possible hot take for this. Because
yes,
there was also the rumors he was planning on firing their offensive coordinator before he got canned. So possible hot take. I don't think Saleh did a bad enough job to get fired. I think the Jets invested too much into Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers was having he was clearly having problems with Saleh. It was pretty.
Yeah.
It was pretty cut, and You could tell on
You
the
can want,
sidelines
yeah.
that something was up.
The sideline highlights this year, the what's it called, like the Hard Knocks last year,
Yeah.
they had no chemistry whatsoever.
I think they went to try and have like a meeting with like Rodgers of like what can we do to make things work because we sold the farm for you basically,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like we're on like the slightly upside of the like the Deshaun Watson to Cleveland trade. Um,
Right.
and
We could still theoretically turn this around.
yeah, and I think Rodgers was like, I don't like Salah. Get him gone.
I mean,
And
it really is the only way.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because like two things can be true. Robert Saleh was not the best coach in the NFL. Like, look, at the end of the day, your record is your record, and you can say, well, he was doing it with Zach Wilson and like a cavalcade of nobodies at quarterback. And it's like, okay, true. But the fact that the locker room got so toxic anytime Zach Wilson came in, like that's kind of on you as the coach. If you're a defensive coach, you also need to be a culture guy because
Yeah.
like the NFL is so geared toward offense. And there wasn't really a culture there. Unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers stole all the culture, and he's a vibes vampire. But at the same time, we can also say he's objectively getting screwed over by by Aaron Rodgers because at the end of the day, as a defensive coach, he's done his job. It is very hard to keep a defense this consistent over a 3-year stretch where they've been in the top 5 in almost every major statistical category for 3 straight years. It's really hard to do that, from talent drain to freak injuries to just like the volatility of defense. He has done his job and then some. Like he has found great talent. He's built like a 3-level defensive juggernaut. But like, yeah, when your team puts all the chips on Aaron Rodgers
Yeah.
and says this is how we win, Aaron Rodgers gets to make the decisions.
If they took
And the problem is,
if they took the effort they'd put into getting Rodgers and designated it to a rookie quarterback last year or even this year, I feel like they would be in a better spot.
I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm like, look, Bo Nix is not necessarily good. But I'm like, if you put Bo Nix and even a vaguely competent offensive coordinator, could you at least not squeak out like 20-10 wins? Could you not do what the Broncos did last week and win like 10-7?
Yeah.
Would that be so hard to do with like a replacement level rookie quarterback? Or even like God, like like something like Sam Howell or Desmond Ritter, where it's like, well, they're not good, but at least they're like functional. Like the problem with Zach Wilson's offenses is they were non-functional.
Yeah.
And like what's hilarious is Nathaniel Hackett got demoted from play calling duties anyway, which I'm like, oh my god, he's literally getting a fucking check to be Aaron Rodgers' bestie. That's so funny.
That's exactly it.
And that gets to the root of the like again, people have been jumping to conspiracy theories about this. Because it is worth noting that Robert Saleh wears his Lebanon patch during games, and owner Woody Johnson was part of the Trump administration, so people are like launching conspiracy theories. And what's unfortunate is like the problem with billionaires is that could be true, but billionaires are also just irrational and overreact. So he might have just fired him for the other reasons. Like it's actually unknown, but. Yeah, like it's fitting that Aaron Rodgers is like an old conservative grump where it's like he only wants to throw to his friends. So Alan Lazard is getting a disproportionate amount of targets. He only wants to run the offense the way he wants to, which means you're running old schemes and old concepts that defensive coaches have already figured out years ago. And like he wants to play how he wants to play, even though he's not nearly as athletic as he used to be. He can't really run. And like his, despite his ability to still throw a couple beautiful passes, the margin for error with his like high risk play is just not there anymore. And that's the guy you basically let run your franchise now.
Yeah.
What's hilarious is Devontae Adams does not solve their problems, but like fuck it, trade for him. You're in too deep. Like, yeah, you still can't run the ball. You still have no clock management. Like Aaron Rodgers still has no plan for a modern NFL blitz package. But like, what else are you gonna do?
Yeah, you really have like so many like you have so many options before you go into that one.
Right, go to firing.
Yeah.
Or picking up Devontae Adams.
But they kind of just,
Yeah, it's this was the only way it was going to go. And also, meanwhile, and this was in my notable notes, Hassan Reddick is in too deep. His agency CAA has fired him for this holdout.
Yeah.
They are mad at him about this now because he's losing money. And it's weird that this is just quietly going on in the background.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a really interesting. It's like a it's like in Mad Men when there would be a really interesting B plot, but the Don Draper stuff is getting really, really good. So you're kind of like, oh, can we come back to this? Like, can we do this next season when we have more time for this? But yeah, it's, you know what? I mean, honestly, there's so many different ways we can unpack this, but it's like, yeah, it really does feel like the minute Aaron Rodgers started talking about ayahuasca, I'm like, yeah, this was the only way this was going to end. Like, it's like the Russell Wilson thing of like, once the Broncos country let's ride stuff starts,
Yeah.
your brain is like, oh yeah, okay. Here's my hot take from all of this. If I'm Ben Johnson or Cliff King, any of these like offensive guru, offensive coordinators who are basically next in line to get head coaching jobs, I'm calling up Robert Saleh right away and being like, hey man, you got screwed over. I'm sorry about that. Like, hang in there. But like, just take a year off, spend some time with your family, and then you and me, we're a package deal, buddy. And basically do what the Vikings do and be like, let's have the best offensive coach and the best defensive coach and just kind of dominate that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, when the Eagles inevitably fire Nick Sirianni and you have the opportunity to hire Robert Saleh and Ben Johnson, I'm rubbing my hands together if it's not coming through the mic.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see now that they fired Saleh where the season goes with the Jets and how things.
And of course, this Monday night game might be a fucking cart. It might actually be a clown show for both teams. Because if the Bills lose this, like, I think the fact that the national media is finally coming after, like, hey, does Sean McDermott suck?
Yeah.
I think that changes things in a way that previously it was not. Like, you know, he had enough people to throw under the bus before that he doesn't anymore. You know what? We can skip that note for next week. I want to see how the Seattle game. Rashee Rice has one of the most cartoonish injuries I've ever seen.
It really is.
So, and you know, you shouldn't like laugh. And I cartoonish suggests I'm laughing at it, and I'm not laughing at it. While at the same time, I don't necessarily feel bad because Rashee Rice did nearly kill someone and try to flee the scene of the crime. Like, it's actually getting to pretty ridiculous territories that he's been allowed to play, but I digress. Anyway, so early in the Chargers-Chiefs game, Patty throws a rough interception. Rashee Rice actually makes a great hustle play and forces a fumble, only to have his knees taken out by Patrick Mahomes going for a low cut tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Miraculously, he did not tear his ACL, even though there was worries about that. He only has a partially torn UCL, so he will be able to come back for the playoffs, theoretically.
Yeah.
But it really is just like, again, the Chiefs are winning these games by the skin of their teeth, and the margin for error is, again, getting so... And it's what I talked about with Tom last week. It's like, yes, the Chiefs have that Patriots energy of, like, they just have a margin for error other teams don't have, because they're so competently run and so calm in pressure situations. They can just kind of wait for other teams to have catastrophic things happen to them. But it's like, how many times can you bank on the Bills being down to their fourth string linebacker? How many times can you bank on, Zay Flowers trying to dive into the end zone too early and fumbling? Like, your window for success is just so much smaller than it was previous years, and it will be interesting to see how they handle it going forward.
Yeah, no, I can agree to that.
All right.
Injury. Yeah, you're
right. Notable notes. I will say Drake May is getting thrown in for the Patriots this upcoming Week 6. God have mercy. Please, please, please just let it go well. I don't want the Patriots to be good, but I really do like Drake May. Especially now that he has pressure, because it's like Caleb's looking good. Jalen Daniels is looking good. Bo Nix looks... I mean, he looks fine. He looks better than he did the first couple weeks. Now there is a little pressure that he has to, like, perform. And I kind of hope he doesn't end up getting hurt as a result.
Yeah, no,
Also, I'm curious.
I think
Oh, go ahead.
I think it's one of those situations of like the team you're putting him against for Drake May.
Hmm.
Because who are they playing? Where are they?
They are playing
They're
the
playing
Texans, and I'm like,
Texans.
uh, the Texans who pressured Josh Allen on more plays than he'd seen in like 5 years.
Yeah, and it's like if you wait 2 week or 1 week, they play the Jaguars, who's kind of been a little bit more of a softball team. I feel like putting him into like a very hot team at first, is that too much too
Mhm.
fast?
Right.
Because like they started. If you start the season, it's technically everyone is on even playing field. You have a 30.
Right.
You have 1 out of 32% odds to win the Super Bowl. That's technically true, regardless. Yeah, there's the motion. Um, so you don't really have a vibe check for everyone, so you can kind of learn while doing.
Right.
We're 6 weeks in, 5 weeks, 6 weeks in. People are
Yes.
set, and things are established.
Mm.
Do you want your first team to, like, your rookie QB? You're going in for your first start. Do you want it to be against a team that has been on the more dominant side of things, where it's like you're getting thrown into a lion's den? Like you said, they pressured Josh Allen an insane amount. Or do you want it against someone like the Jaguars, where it's just kind of like, ooh, they're kind of a mess, but in a cute way?
Yeah. Um, yeah. To be honest, this really does feel like the locker room was starting to get antsy move because reasonably, you do not put him in this game unless players are starting to feel like there's no point in playing.
Yeah.
So hopefully they at least just scheme up enough to keep him alive. Um, the death of offense was greatly exaggerated. We have had a couple of like huge scoring weeks in a row. As we discussed, the absolute barn burner between the Ravens and the Bengals. Even the Colts and the Jaguars are getting up to 30 points. A lot of the hand wringing about like, oh, why are passing offenses down so much? Turns out to just be, yeah, it turns out people not playing in the preseason matters. I am curious what your note, just Sunday Night Football. Yuck.
All right.
Is that a reference to the Steelers game?
It is, or no, it's not.
Well, I would be
It's a
reticent
reference
to
to.
not point out.
It's a reference to
Oh,
this one. the The Sunday Night Football game for the Steelers Cowboys was, it was not ideal.
it
It
was
also,
more for the novelty that it made it the longest day of NFL football we've ever seen.
yes.
Which it's like I said, too much football. Got to tone it down a little bit.
Although the funny stat line to come out of that is Dak Prescott is the only quarterback to throw 2 interceptions over the course of 2 days, but only in one game.
Mhm.
That is just
What's said is that might be his most notable accomplishment.
that is a hilarious stat line that I do not think is almost possible to beat. Um, no, the Sunday Night Football yuck is to this week, upcoming week. Bengals versus the Giants.
Why did they do that?
I don't know. And it's like the Bengals had the potential to be good. The Giants,
They are good. They
they're
just have a bad
good.
defense.
I think it's safe to say the Giants are this year's Cardinals from last year, where they are the best worst team.
Right.
Um,
Because when they get moving on offense, they can scheme up enough that's interesting, and they have a pass rush, which it's like if you're not going to have a good defense, at least have a good pass rush because that can
yes.
kind of excuse everything else.
Yeah, and it's like I always say. I think the concept of flexing games should be used more. However, you can't do different days this little notice. Like,
Yeah.
we're at week 6. I think the earliest week you can do like different games for time slots, like for specific or different games for different days of the week, is week 10. I think you need
Hmm.
to give the fans and people a very big amount of berth before you actually do that kind of stuff. But
Right.
like, but that being said, I feel like as long as like most a week beforehand, you can switch game day, like same day time slots,
Mm.
minus foreign games, which
I still like the idea that they announce what time everyone's playing, like right after Monday Night Football or like Tuesday night.
yeah,
You would just have to eliminate Thursday night games, though, and Amazon did not pay that much money to not have Thursday night
yeah.
games.
I think it's possible. Like I think if you keep the days the same,
Mhm.
right, minus like I said, the like huge amount of time in between. But I think if you keep the like, I think like you have like an NFL recap show on Tuesdays, not even at prime time, like dinner time slot, and you have that, and you go, all right, we know like for example week 7,
Mhm.
it's like, all right, you have Broncos Saints on Thursday, you have Chargers Cardinals and Ravens Buccaneers on, oh, that's actually pretty fun, on Monday. And you have Patriots Jaguars in Europe because we hate the British.
Right.
Here is the times for every other game on that. Like, here's the times for the Sunday games. Because that Sunday night game is Jets Steelers. I'm.
Mm.
Alright. Options that could be better: Texans Packers, Lions Vikings, Seahawks Falcons could be a don't sleep on one. Chiefs 49ers, a Super Bowl rematch. But that's at 4:05. Why? Um, so like that's my belief on changing time slots. So this
Mm.
week it's Bengals Giants Sunday Night Football. Gross. They have a combined total of 3 wins. Um,
I would be remiss, though, quickly. I forgot to mention my don't sleep on game from week 5. Yours was Baltimore
yeah,
Cincinnati,
and we
which we
talked about
talked
that.
about.
Yeah,
But New York Seahawks. I would be remiss if I did not just mention the Giants did end up winning in cartoonish fashion
yes.
because what would have been a lead-taking field goal got blocked and returned for a touchdown.
Which was
The
awesome.
opposite day version of field goals win games.
Yes.
It's technically correct.
You live by
Technically
the field goal,
correct
you
still.
die by the field goal. That's how I say.
Exactly. Anyway, you continue.
Um, so it's like having that like that. It's like, ooh, I'm not sure how I feel about that. When you
Hmm.
have Commanders Ravens, which I'll talk more about that. That's a 1 o'clock game. Buccaneers Saints, also a 1 o'clock game. Cardinals Packers, Lions Cowboys. Like you have so
Right.
many other
That
options.
Commanders game is a case study in like why you need to flex because it's like, come on, who thought the Commanders would be this good this fast?
Yeah, like
I
they're
didn't.
the last year's Texans. Um,
Exactly. You have to be prepared for Texans.
yes, but it's like you have all these weird options, and like you can put it in because I'm still of the belief that the best game of the week should be Sunday Night Football. I think
Mhm.
I think that should be the best night of football. It should be like a close game, hopefully, with nothing crazy, like no crazy delays, strong teams, and then you have your second best game of the week Thursday night, which is proven to be kind of true, and uh, Monday night also like the second
Mhm.
best game of the week, and then the 1 o'clock time slots or whatever. The 4 o'clock time slots are like the kind of like a I could tune into this if it's my team's not playing. Like
Right.
you're fighting for a um what's it called? You're like I think the so like the 1 o'clock time slots are your we're just playing games. It's going to be whoever the local market wants. The 4 o'clock time slots are we are competing for TV time. We're competing for viewers.
A little more artisanal.
Yeah, a little more artisanal. A little more. This isn't us just playing football. Let's take in some legitimate statistics into this. And Thursday and Monday should be quality games, and Sunday Night Football, best game of the week. And that's Kevin's soapbox for now.
I always save a spot on that damn soapbox because I know how you feel so strongly about this.
Sorry, week 10, Lions Texans. That could be fun. And then the week before, Eagles Jaguars. Ooh, that should be spaced out.
Right. It feels like politics at this point of look, all of you have to get at least a couple sucky games. I'm tired. We're tired of getting yelled at by the Thursday team.
Yeah.
Shall we hit our question of the week real quick?
Sure.
Which head coach do you think could be the next to be fired? I'm assuming you meant to be fired. You didn't finish the sentence.
I finished it when I wrote it in the wrong week.
It is very funny that there is this. It really is funny that there's this discussion now of now that the floodgate is open, a lot of teams who have been thinking about it can feel more comfortable because it's you don't want to be the guy who fires a coach before it's even Halloween.
You don't want to be first.
Right.
You don't want to
that makes you look like the irrational billionaire. But now that another billionaire has taken that sword, fallen on that sword for you, you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
I'm curious who you're thinking for this.
So I saw a list online of all the teams, and one that I don't think should be considered is Nick Sirianni.
Really? Okay.
I think so. The Super Bowl season, there were some bold strats. They lost and some questionable behavior by the coordinators who got jobs very quickly after the Super Bowl. Just saying. I'm not saying there was tampering, but it was definitely tampering. I think they even proved it. I think so. It's I think there's a lot of not potential, but it's just there was that. And then last year, it was just coordinators that were just bad at their jobs. No one changed anything, and it could have been a Sirianni thing, but he still has a very winning record. And this year, while it's starting off to kind of dog shit, there is levels of being on the computer, of levels of competence, of the staffing, and I think that's the most important part to a solid coaching staff is levels of competence. I think Dougie P in Jacksonville should be worried. Bengals head coach should be worried because there's
Zach Taylor.
Yeah, because there's also this level of I don't think the Patriots head coach should be worried because it's his first season. And he's given a kind of a piece of shit. If he was given a good team, say Andy Reid was I'm gonna retire, guys, and he was given that team and they had that record of 1-4, it's all right, what the fuck, you're bad. I feel there has to be awareness of I was given crap, or we're giving him crap. We have to at least let him build and refigure. But I think those two are on I would say those two are the short list of who can get fired. Daboll does not have job security, but I don't think he has to worry about being next. I think if anything, he is going to be.
He would at least get the dignity of getting through the season.
Correct. That's exactly what I was going to say. He'll at least finish the season, and then if they don't make playoffs, it's a mid-playoffs discussion of hey, in other news, Daboll is no longer with the Giants.
Right. I feel he'll at least get an opportunity to pitch his vision for the next couple of years. I think the biggest challenge for him is the obvious question is, are you going to rush and are you going to be able to get me a quarterback? And frankly, this quarterback class is just not great. It's a lot of B minus level players, and like maybe some have upside, but like really they should probably just wait another year for the much better class that's led by the Manning kid. But that's a really hard sell to be like, hey, Mr. Owner, do you want to be embarrassed for another year?
Yeah. Like the
Um,
pitch of tanking for an entire another season.
like
Um,
that's a big ask, especially because you already managed to get Malik Neighbors a concussion.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
If it wasn't a
I was
Manning, I
tempted to
would
put
say no one would do it. Like,
right. And I have to imagine the Manning kids like, I don't want to play where one of the Mannings already like I want to
I
be on
want
my
to
own
be my
team.
own. I don't want to be a legacy. I
Right.
want to be new.
Like wouldn't it have been kind of lame if the Saints drafted Peyton and then drafted Eli and we just had the chain of Manning, like it was just a generation of Mannings going to New Orleans. Like that wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
Like let them go, I don't know, let them go to the well, they wouldn't go to the Raiders. Maybe the Cowboys. I don't know. Something
Arizona.
fun. Arizona. Well, no, Kyler's looked really good these last couple weeks.
I'm not saying he's
let him go to the
it's still like 2 years from now.
I would say Cleveland, but don't reward Cleveland for bad behavior.
Cleveland
You know, I'm gonna throw
or quit.
Miami. Let him go to Miami. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I actually think Mike McDaniel's a low key possible one, but he did make the playoffs.
I think
I
think Mike McDaniel's, if Tua wasn't basically
it keeps giving him an
destroying
out.
his brain, it's giving him his job. Maybe that's why.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's kind of giving him an excuse that a lot of other guys don't have.
They very clearly do not have depth in the quarterback position.
Yeah, I was tempted to go Doug Peterson, but I feel like I'm like, man, it can't get much worse than this. As long as they do better than rock bottom,
Yeah.
he might be able to save his job. I'm gonna go with quiet one, Antonio Pierce, and I feel bad because we want the interim coach to work out once,
Yes.
right? Like one time, we want to see the guy who the players rally around and the vibes get better. Just once for that to work out. It has not. Outside of a very successful win against the Ravens, they have just kind of it's just kind of been a follow up to the last couple debacles.
Yeah, I think
He's
I think he's still safe based off of the I was given a piece of crap mentality. And sure, he worked a little bit, but I feel like their biggest acquisition from the draft. Oh God, what's the kid's name?
Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers, and he's turned out very well in my opinion. He's showing up, and it's
I think for me, why I put him first is just because like the vibes have gotten really bad. You've made a toxic relationship with Devontae Adams,
yes,
and it's what we've talked about of just like where is this team? Is it a rebuild team? Is it a win now team? And I think at some point the owner is just going to get frustrated and be like, I'm just going to go for a big fish. I'm just going to go for a Vrabel. I'm just going to go for one of the big names and ask him like, make this a playoff team now, please. We spent too much money on this.
What week are we at? I accidentally knocked my mic over and Bean stepped on my computer and she hit the right button to wind it all the way back to October 2023 for the Raiders schedule.
Those were the days.
They lost to the Chargers, and then they lost to they beat the Packers, and then they beat the Patriots. Fun facts with Kevin. All right, so let's talk a little bit about next week.
Yes, we are on week 6. It is our second round of buys. Kind of a lot of high-profile ones to start, honestly. We are currently looking at, for bye weeks, sorry, I also accidentally closed the page, Kansas City, the Los Angeles Rams, Miami, Minnesota. Minnesota riding high, Miami bleeding out. The Rams, if Cooper Kupp doesn't come back after this week, he's probably just not coming back. And Kansas City, have a week to figure out if you can improve your receiver room. What is your don't sleep on game?
So I think I went for an interesting one, and we talked about it a little bit. Baltimore and Washington. I feel like first off, the proximity alone between usually I like to pick like a solid division rivalry or something like that. Different conferences, but these two teams are in literally, I don't know, 2-hour drive from each other. They're very close to each other.
Yes.
Actually, let me go that.
In a lot of ways, Baltimore kind of snatched a crown from. Again, it's so hard to imagine, but at the time, the Commanders, like the Washington football team, they were like the only game in town for a huge chunk of the nation. Basically, from like Georgia all the way up to Pennsylvania, that was it. That was the one football team. And now we got Baltimore, the Falcons, the Carolina Panthers. Like we have so many teams in that area now. In a lot of ways, Baltimore is like the crown jewel of that like sort of marshy South area.
Sorry, I got the directions. I literally pulled up the directions. It is like an hour drive. Um, so they are very close, very very close to each other, and
Yes.
they are both like the Ravens had, like I said earlier, they had a really tough loss week one. They had a close loss week two, and then they've been win 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 win. They're really hitting their stride now. And now it is like and Washington's just kind of like, oh, we got Jalen Daniels. Let's see what happens. We got Cliff Kingsbury. Let's see what happens. Oh, we're gonna play some games. We're gonna win some games. And
Oh, we're actually going to be good.
I feel like this is their litmus test of, are they actually good, or has their opponents been just not? Because
Right. Yeah. If they get out of this game looking decent, then this is
Yeah.
very much for real.
they lost to the Bucks week one. They beat the Giants, which kind of means nothing. They beat the Bengals, which also kind of means nothing. Browns, and they beat the Browns pretty heartedly, and they smoked the Cardinals, which kind of means something. So I think the Ravens are a fun litmus test to see how much they've improved, and then they have 1, 2, 3 weeks of Panthers, Bears, Giants.
Yeah, then we go back to, well, the Bears defense is actually pretty good, but
Yeah.
But yeah, this will be the do or die game. And Baltimore, it's just, can you keep, now that you feel like the team beat, is this going to be a repeat of last year where the team to beat gets their like cheeks ripped off every other week?
Yeah. Who knows?
Yes. And mine is the Los Angeles Chargers versus the Denver Broncos.
I need
Don't
you to
tell
explain,
anyone.
because I'm very invested in this reason.
Look, Justin Herbert has looked solid this year. I've actually enjoyed. Greg Roman is similar to Cliff Kingsbury, where I really do feel like they just need to have a second offensive coordinator who handles all the stuff they suck at. But like the vision of let's build a run-heavy team with like one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league has proven out pretty well. The offensive line has taken some hits. I don't know if Joel Delete will be able to play this week. Like Slater's been injured, so it'll be tough to see them against this Denver front. And like, don't tell people I think this, but I actually think Denver's kind of good. Like, not great. Let's dissuade ourselves of that notion. But last week, Bo Nix at least reached the level of, look, can you look competent in a Sean Payton offense? And from there, the Denver defense has quietly been one of the 2 or 3 best in the league. It really is insane how like they basically have 2 cornerbacks who are playing all pro levels right now, led by Patrick Surtain. And it really is kind of crazy, much like the Chiefs defense last year, how far that can kind of get you of just like, oh, well, we have 2, if our defensive backfield's unstoppable, we kind of just get to dictate the terms of this game. Again, in terms of games that feel fake, I'm throwing out that 70-point loss to the Dolphins. Like, I'm convinced that was just a bad day and, like, Miami was being petty over Nathaniel Hackett. Because apparently everyone's fucking friends with Nathaniel Hackett in the NFL. But yeah, I actually think this is going to be an interesting matchup of a steady, turnover-proof offense versus a turnover-causing defense. Like, in a lot of ways, like, they're similar to Minnesota, and they can kind of do everything where it's like they scheme up interesting blitz packages. They are capable of the bend don't break stuff, but they are able to turn up the heat when it's necessary. But the difference is Minnesota, it's impressive because they have a noticeable lack of dudes. The Denver defense has a handful of really cool dudes. So I'm excited to see this matchup.
Nah, I can agree to those terms. All right.
Shall we wrap it up for the week?
Yeah, send us home.
Thank you for listening to this double-sided episode, guys, and thank you for being patient as we've been dealing with all of our various early fall plannings. As we dive into week 6, as October rolls on and the leaves start changing and that cider gets crisper, I can't wait to share this football month with you. But until then, I'm Carter.
I'm Kevin.
Have a magical fuck my life. I did the Disney desk ending.